Hey guys, it's Mike Monte, one half of Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. And we want to reach out to all the fans out there who have supported our show to say thank you. Thank you for making 2021 one of our best years. And one of our best years was because of Anchor. Anchor, the way that you can have your voice heard. You can be just like us. Record your own podcast. Use the Anchor tools to edit your podcast. Use it on a phone. Use it on your computer. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all with Anchor, they're totally free. So be just like Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte the Pharaoh. We're looking together for a great 2022. We've got huge guests coming on board. Oh, yeah. You probably wonder why Jimmy's not here right now. Well, he's prepping for one of the best interviews we're about to have, and we're going to surprise someone with. So hang aboard with us, and don't forget, be like us and use Anchor.
"12 hours later, I was sent to the 28th precinct, transferred to, let's put it this way, the smallest precinct that lost the most cops. The busiest, worst precinct in the city of New York. We were known as the murder factory. 365 days a year, you would have a homicide. And handling that was 25 detectives. And I was one of them. I worked on a number of fixtures. Where did you meet this one? Where did you go? What did you do?
You're in a no-smoking area, sir. Will you please extinguish your cigarettes?
You got to watch who you're talking to.
You're gonna hate yourself in the morning.
There's been a lot of hassles here. Is that the one that followed you?
Yeah.
Why didn't you go with him?
I don't know.
Fred Jurgensen was a surprise to me because he was a very good actor.
It's what you have in mind for him.
He was a natural.
No matter what they do, are you man enough?
I'm born and raised in this neighborhood, and this neighborhood was always at the bottom. The drug problem was out of hand. You didn't have walking cops. Everybody was in a radio car. We had problems. You could see it was building. 13 police officers had been set up and killed. Piagentini and Jones, Foster and Laurie, Curry and Benetti shot outside the DA's office. All right here. That day, at about 10 to 12, this 1013 call came over. 1013 means a police officer needs assistance. And it was accompanied by shots fired. I'm on the second floor at 102 West 116th Street, Minister Louis Farrakhan's Mosque, number 7. I'm here 9 years. We never had trouble at the mosque. And then when I realized that this cop is shot inside there, we're going to have a problem.
Are you gonna be around?
The Panthers would stand outside and sing Bridge Over Troubled Waters and then try to force their way into the precinct.
Don't you think you should be there? Are you man enough when the going is rough? Is it in your heart to care?
The initial call was made from a landline to 911. As a cop, if I listened to that, I would have known it was a phony. I'm sorry to say it wasn't newsworthy. South of 96th Street was 6 o'clock news. North of 96th Street, it was just another homicide. It was a nightmare to work into the 2-8. That's where I went, and guess what? I loved every minute of it. I wouldn't change it for nothing.
Are you man enough when the going comes? Is it in your heart to care?
My name is Randy Jurgensen. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be talking a little bit today, and certainly in the future, of how I went from Harlem to homicide to Hollywood. I'll start a little bit about Hollywood and work my way back to Harlem. During the 70s, I worked on some of the most iconic films that were ever made. It started with me with the French Connection. I actually drove in the chase. I actually drove The Master with William Friedkin, Billy Friedkin, the director, operating the camera. And that chase has always been number one. I then went from the French Connection, I went into the Godfather, making the Godfather. I wound up out in Nassau County, Long Island, operating a machine gun as to where I would shoot the famous or infamous toll booth scene that had James Caan, who was playing Sonny Corleone. I machine gunned him to death. In fact, Francis Coppola said to me, because of all the women who were in love with James Caan playing Sonny Corleone, that I would probably be the most hated man in America. I went on to make pictures and drove in some of the pictures, the 7-Ups, Report to the Commissioner, Badge 373. I wound up working on a picture that was based upon my earlier exploits, the Cruising, to which Al Pacino's character, it's based on me. Al Pacino did portray me in the movie Cruising. In the future, in future episodes, I will be talking about that and talking about these pictures and how I got into these pictures and the role that I played in these pictures, acting, driving, and wound up producing, co-producing and producing some of my own movies. However, to go back to Harlem, I was born to the parents of superintendents. They were the superintendents of a 5-floor walk-up. I was maybe 2 blocks south of 125th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. And in fact, I was born in the building. The hospital that Mom was supposed to go to, they had some kind of a measles epidemic or whatever it was. So I was actually born at home. That house that I was born and raised in is about 6.5 blocks from the famous Apollo Theater, which is located on 125th Street in Harlem. I wound up working there, working in Harlem. However, I went to school a Catholic school by the name of Corpus Christi. We could walk to the school. It was 2 or 3 blocks from where I was living. And the school went up to the 8th grade, and it had 2 first grades, 2 second grades, 2 third grades, and always opposite, never in the grade that I was Georgie Carlin. Of course, we became friends. We had a little gang, as we got older, and George was in the gang. Part of my chores as the oldest of 5, being superintendents, every Friday, my brother and myself, we would have to, sweep the halls down, or maybe it was a Saturday, because Sunday everybody went to church. So we would have to sweep the halls down, my brother and myself, and we'd mop the halls down. Every Monday to Friday, when we went to school, we would go out front and we would take the empty garbage cans and throw them down the stairs off the sidewalk. We were 10 and 9, and these were the things that we were doing. Very early on in life, for me anyway, I learned that, if I wanted some money, I was going to have to go out and earn it. So I learned that very, very early on. As I grew up in West Harlem, when I got out of the 8th grade, but a few things happened to me that sort of gave me a little bit of an arrest record that would come back to haunt me later on. We used to swim, as they called it, bare ass in the Hudson River right off of 125th Street. Of course, we always had underwear on. And inevitably, we would get caught. We would get caught. The cops would catch us. And also, back then, truant officers were very active. So, when we would get caught, the 5 of us, the 6 of us, including George Carlin and a few others of my friends back then. By the way, this belongs here now. Of that hard 5 or 6, we would all grow up, lie about our age to get into the military, and 3 of us became cops. The other three wound up much later on in life. One went down for a murder. The other 2, they couldn't pass a liquor store that they couldn't stick up. Finally got caught, went to jail. Much later on in life, one was killed, and I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to the other one. But that was like the 6 or 7 of us that started, say, from the 6th grade, getting in trouble. And how did we get in trouble? Well, we were swimming in the Hudson River, and when we would get caught, we would all give a phony name. So one day, we got caught naturally, and we're lined up. 6 of us, 5 of us at least, are lined up. And I remember that I was first in line, and I gave a name. I don't know what it was. The next 2 or 3, they gave the phony name. And when it came to George Carlin gave the cops Randy Jurgensen, the right name, my right address of where I lived, and of course, it's all a big joke. But those are the things that George Carlin was doing early on in life. So when I got out of the 8th grade, I knew of a man in the neighborhood, and his name was Clint. and Clint was a black man. And Clint would take, long before lotto was legal, Clint would be collecting numbers. He'd collect numbers. Back then, everybody in my neighborhood played numbers. It was a quarter. Understand the times that I'm talking about. And, if you won for a quarter, you won $125. I would say that that's like $1,250 today. So everybody in the neighborhood was betting numbers with Clint. I'll tell you what else Clint did. There would be a Saturday, and we were 5, 6, 7 of us. Of course, we had our gang, and of course, we're getting into trouble, but not trouble like I explained about sticking up liquor stores. No, we're getting into trouble. And he would come along, and he would grab the 5 or 6 of us, and he'd walk us down to 125th Street, and there was a theater there called the Columbia that had so many bugs in it that we called it the Itch House. And he would take us down there, and he would put us in the movies. Back then, you saw at least 2 movies and 5 episodes. I mean, if you went in there at 12 o'clock, you weren't getting out until 5. And when you came out, if it was still daylight, your eyes hurt. That's what Clint would do. Back then, my parents would collect the rent from the people that resided in the building. And I'll never forget this. The rent was $28. Every month, without exaggeration, somebody would knock on our door and say, I can't pay the rent this month. I can only give this X amount of money. The building was owned by a Jewish man by the name of Friedberg. He never, ever put anybody out. He did not do that at all. I mean, the man was a sweetheart. My mother would explain to him why they couldn't pay the rent, and he said, okay, we'll get it next month or whatever. It was great. However, a couple of buildings down from me, the people were experiencing the same thing. And this is the story about Clint. They were experiencing the same thing. And there was a sheriff, actually a sheriff's department in the city of New York, and part of their job was that people who did not pay their rent, they came and actually put the furniture out in the street. And so this happened a couple of times, but I can only speak of one incident. And as they put the furniture out there in the street, Clint came along, and whatever he did speaking to them, they went away. And Clint actually paid the rent for these people for 1 month. And of course, the electricity was shut off and whatever else goes on. And then we, as kids, in that neighborhood, we would pick up the furniture and we brought the furniture back into the house. My mother being the superintendent, my dad never admitted we were superintendents, but my mother being the superintendent, she knew how to go into the basement and turn the lights back on, of which she did. That's basically how, I was raised. I knew all of that by the time I saw all of that, experienced all of that, by the time I was 12 years of age. I knew in my neighborhood who was taking illegal numbers. I knew in my neighborhood who was taking sports bets down at the bar. I knew in my neighborhood where they would have what was called back then a wire room. And the wire room was a place that you went to, knocked on the door, you got in there, and there were all kinds of telephones and charts where they were taking all kind of horse bets. I saw all of that. And those wire rooms, at this point in the story, those wire rooms would move from different locations. So I knew all of that by the time that I was 12 years of age. Especially the sports bets, since my uncle was taking the sports bets down at the bar. So when I got out of the 8th grade, I began to pick up the numbers for Clint. And what that really meant was going to various locations within the neighborhood. And one of the places that I went to was an ink factory called St. Clair and Valentine's. And what I would do is I would pick up the numbers. They had to be into Clint before the first race at the racetrack. Back then it was Belmont and Aqueduct, before the first race went off. That's how they would determine the numbers that never came out all at once, all 3 numbers. They came out one at a time. And then maybe at 2:30, the second number would come out. And by 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, the third number would come out. So all of these numbers had to be to Clint by 1 o'clock. So I would pick up the numbers at St. Clair and Valentine. Then I would pick up the numbers at 2 different bars. And I actually went to the library on 125th Street where these numbers were left. They were always left in a brown bag. And I picked up the numbers from there. And then I would go to Clint, which he had a candy store. At first it was located over on Broadway at about 122nd Street, but then it was located on Amsterdam Avenue at 124th Street. So I would pick these numbers up, and suddenly I found myself with money in my pocket. Good money in my pocket. And with that said, this is not the first time that I'm revealing that. That was the last time I went to school. I never went to school again. I had been accepted into a Catholic school called Bishop Dubois on 152nd Street, and the only time, being the wise ass or the wise guy that I was, when I heard that they were having a mixed dance, that meant that girls would be coming to the dance at Bishop Dubois High School. I went and I attended just to meet the schools. I never did a day of going into that high school. So that blossomed into the wire room that I explained to you. I would then stand out on 125th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, looking straight across 125th Street. I could see the Apollo Theater. I would then, and I was paid for this, the people who were going to bet on the horses would come to me, and I would give them the current address of where the wire room was. Plus, there were floating crap games in the neighborhood, and I knew where they were, and the people the crap shooters, dice, they would come up to me and they would ask, where is the floating crap game? That only happened on weekends. So I was making good money. I would then come home, and I saw how my father did it with his mother, which is my grandmother. My father would go to my grandmother's house every Friday night, and he would put money on the table. So I began, and my brother did the same thing. I began with the money that I was making. I would go home and I would put the money on the kitchen table. I think my father didn't know, but my mother had eyes in the back of her head. My mother knew that I wasn't going to school and what I was doing. So obviously, one day, I got caught. I got caught taking, bringing the numbers over to Clint.
Right.
So,
right. Hold on, they're on a break.
I will tell you in the future exactly, how that affected me going on to become a police officer.
They took a quick break.
Jimmy, I gotta take a dump.
What?
No, I need a dumpster.
Well, for all those needs, you need to call Big V Dumpster Rental, Long Island, New York, 631-900-DUMP. Elm Logistics. For all your logistic needs, call 631-299-3595. That's 631-299-3595. Elm Global Logistics. Pride, performance, and partnerships.
Much more in depth from Harlem to homicide to Hollywood. Take care.